Hi, I'm Robin Weisman, and I'm the Senior Policy Counsel at Coin Center, and welcome to this episode of Tangents. Today, we are absolutely thrilled to have Michale Casey with us to talk about the three questions that I'm asking a number of people about cryptocurrency. So many people that are listening, probably anybody who's listening, already knows Michale Casey by name, but just in case there's somebody out there that does not know who he is, Michale Casey is CoinDesk's Chief Content Officer. And prior to that, he spent 18 years at the Wall Street Journal. He was a senior advisor at MIT's Media Lab Digital Currency Initiative. He was a senior lecturer at the MIT Sloan School of Management. And he was a co-founder and is now chairman at Streambed Media. And in addition to all of that, as if that wasn't enough, Michale Casey has authored two books. One, The Age of Cryptocurrency, and the other is The Truth Machine. So welcome, Michale. Thank you so much for being with us today. So I've started a little thing. You're the second in my series of asking three questions around cryptocurrency, because I think that while there are a ton of interesting issues in the crypto space that you obviously write about and think about and talk about and lecture about often, one of the things I find really interesting is the people in the space and how the people in the space came to find cryptocurrency, what got them interested, and what's kept them involved. And with you, obviously, there's a ton to talk about. So I think let's just start with the first question, which is, how did you find cryptocurrency? Like, what got you interested to begin with?
Sure. And maybe I'll use this as a segue because when you mentioned the two books I'd written, I've actually written five. I don't want to say it's a gloat.
I meant two books about cryptocurrency.
It's very important, though, that I mentioned that those were co-authored with my former colleague and good friend, Paul Vigna, who I think probably went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole about the same time that I did in 2013. I think Paul may have even been ahead of me, but the two of us ended up launching BitBeat, which I'm proud to say. When people look at how mainstream media is finally getting crypto now, I'd like to point out.
That's actually something I want to talk about.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that for sure.
How did I get into it? So I was covering foreign exchange. I was a currency columnist. I used to write columns for the journal at that time on big picture themes, the global macro economy. But I was very interested in currencies, which is what I'd done most of my life as a Forex reporter, and then as a bureau chief in Argentina, different places. The currency was always this big thing I was focused on. So what is this weird Bitcoin thing that emerged in the middle of that? There was the Cyprus crisis, for example, or rather and ultimately at that time, the price rallied and people wondering what's going on. Why is Bitcoin doing this? And I started to look at it, and I didn't write a particularly good article. I just was confused. I had no idea how a currency could just be created out of a computer. I didn't really grasp what was going on. I don't think I wrote a terrible piece, but I wrote one that I think just glossed over what was going on. And I think it probably ended up as you'd be crazy to get into this bubble-like, tulip-like sort of setting at the time. And I was called in by a bunch of folks who were getting into Bitcoin at the time, entrepreneurs. Jeremy Allaire was one of them. Barry Silbert was another. Raj Date, who had been previously the interim head of the CFPB, was at this place. So it was a gathering of folks who were investing and interested in Bitcoin, who invited journalists to come. And I was like, all right, sounds intriguing and interesting. And some of those names were somewhat familiar to me. And I was like, why are they involved in this sort of weird offshoot of a thing? And we had a really interesting dinner. And somebody started just explaining to me, it was either Jeremy or Barry, how there was this core solution to trust and that would be really valuable in a developing world setting where there is not the same foundation of money that we have in the US and the West. In places that have got these sort of broken financial systems, it would be valuable to have this, trustless mechanism for people to have a money that they could use. And I'd spent 6 years in Argentina. I mean, it's why I wrote about, financial crises all the time. And it was an integral part of the way I see things, because I'd been living through this. Argentina was a formative experience for me. I like to tell people that if you want to understand how money works, it's really good to look at how it doesn't work.
Yeah, yes.
And Argentina is a good place to understand how it doesn't work, because when you do that, you start to dig into the breakdown of the social covenant that a national currency is supposed to represent between the promise of its value and the substance of that, and the maintenance of that system, and all the bits and pieces that go into it, including the banking system, that the government essentially, maintains with its people. If that covenant breaks down, if the trust falls apart, it all falls apart. That's why Argentina has cycles of hyperinflation and then deflation when they start. It's an ongoing problem, and anyone who follows Argentina will know that they're in the middle of one yet again. And so I've started to understand that. I would understand it from the perspective of institutional breakdown. So we would always think about, okay, so they need to have less corruption, and they need, a government that they can trust, and their politicians need to be more honest. And I would dig into, why does that not the case? Why can't they get it? And I realized it was a vicious cycle they couldn't get out of, because of, corruption begets, lies and begets stealing. It's just an ongoing cycle. But I'd never thought that you could actually substitute that process for a different governance mechanism entirely. Right. So when I saw that, that was that light bulb moment. I was like, wow, we're talking about a replacement of those institutions, not improving the institutions, about thinking about a system. And then from that, you start thinking about what is money and how, where does it come from? So it was very much my experience, I think, in the developing world. My wife is an anthropologist. She'd studied Bolivia and Bolivian migrants and the problems that they face in terms of their own sort of unbanked and unidentified status, and this concept of the informal economy, living on the edges. And without that base of institutional identity and structure, people are excluded, right? And so that has always been the stuff I've been interested in. I'm 2 years in Indonesia, a year in Thailand. And so I've always thought about that. And just the very idea that in a digital economy, we could leapfrog somehow into a different structure was fascinating.
And that idea came to you. So we have Jeremy and Barry to thank for planting that seed in your head.
I now work indirectly.
No, yeah, obviously. Full disclosure, yeah.
Full disclosure, Barry still, but
yes.
Founder and owner of DCG is the owner of CoinDesk. Yes.
But what was it that when you decided, you went from saying, okay, now we can have a decentralized way of having money, mm-hmm. and you can see the value of that. And what brought you from that to deciding that you and Paul should get together and write The Age of Cryptocurrency? How did this book come to be? And actually, for those of you who can see,
there it is.
You can't. If some people might be listening, but I'm holding up a copy of The Age of Cryptocurrency, and we'll get back to this in a minute because there's an interesting story here.
Great. I just wrote a column pointing out why, and I said at the top of the column, why I feel so privileged to write about this space is because I get to write about not just any old disruption, not just the disruption of like the technology that we've had for the last 10 years or 20 years, mm-hmm. not even one that we've had for 100 years. We're talking about the disruption of a systems that have got the centuries and sometimes millennia old. So this column was literally about Bitcoin versus gold.
I was going to say the Bitcoin versus gold column. It was excellent.
Right. Yes. Gold is 7,000 years old as a system.
And now we have this.
And it is, and then one answer that when you say that out is go, well, that's crazy. It's 7,000 years old. How could you defeat that? And that's a good question. It is hard to overcome something as entrenched as that deeply culturally embedded concept, because ultimately it's all about story and narrative, which is what the column's about. But the point I'm making is that now is the time, because we have transitioned from an analog world. That 7,000 years, that's an analog world. We now live in a digital economy. Anybody who doesn't think the digital economy has transformed us, that software isn't eating the world, as Mark Andreessen says, is living under a rock, right? I mean,
Right.
we have been absolutely transformed by this. And so we need a transformative new system of money that lives in that world. So when I kind of realized that and saw that, I was like, there's nothing more important in the world to write about. I mean, this is, why would you want to write about anything else? If you, certainly in finance, right? I mean, I say this in my recruiting efforts at CoinDesk, and I'm proud to say I've brought in some very, very talented, very, very well-accomplished journalists to lead different divisions within CoinDesk, because that's the story I tell them. This is the most exciting story in finance. There's nothing more bigger than writing about the transformation of something that's 7,000 years old. So yeah, I mean, to me, once I got it, it was a no-brainer. I was going to just do this.
Right.
And it was, the other thing I'll say is I think Paul and I both were very inspired or intrigued or just sort of fascinated by the characters involved in this space. I think one of the most sort of absolutely charming experiences, certainly those early days of Bitcoin, was like the dreamers that it would bring in who were just saying, I'm going to create an entirely new, different system of money or an entirely different governance system. And they did it. I remember meeting Vitalik Buterin at the North American Bitcoin Conference at the end of 2013 and thinking, this 21-year-old has just built what he thinks is going to be a world computer. I mean, just that very idea is profound. So, look, it's the idea of transformation married with this incredible enthusiasm of the people around it, and the journey of ups and downs, of failures and successes, and the whole process that obviously gets a lot of critique and sometimes mockery from the outside world is an integral part of this still very early stage change that we're going through. All of that from a writer's perspective is wonderful.
It's rich. It's a rich narrative filled with interesting characters and fun twists and turns. And you haven't even started talking about the policy issues. But I would also just say that in 2015, at the time that you wrote the book, I went back and I looked at some old interviews that you had done, some lectures that you and Paul had given. And no, it's actually really cool to watch. But you talked a lot about us being at a crossroads, right? And we were at a crossroads of, like you said, these inventors, these dreamers, these true believers who have created this system and sort of the mainstream world and where these two things were going to come together. So I might be kind of getting a little out of order with my questions, but I did want to ask you, where do you think we are now in terms of those crossroads? Like, where do you think we've come since 2015 in that paradigm? Do we still, because in some ways I feel like we've come so far, and in some ways I feel like we still are facing a lot of the same tensions.
So I think we can. I think we're used to things happening really quickly, and so we can be impatient, right? And we think it's going to happen tomorrow. And so, look, I just talked about this being a 7,000-year transformation in the making. You know, you don't snap your fingers and change that overnight. So I still think we're at a crossroads, right? If you step back in time and you take a 7,000-year view, the last 5 years is a tiny little spot on that. It's going to look like a crossroads if you step back just far enough, right? So I still think we're there, right? But I definitely think we're moving closer to just, figuring out how the branching off happens. And I definitely think that maybe we are getting ahead of ourselves here, but let's just mention, I mean,
go for it.
the onslaught in the last, few months even of these big names in certainly on Wall Street and in business.
Absolutely.
Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, the biggest fund manager in the world, $7.5 trillion of assets under management, talking about the properties of Bitcoin as a replacement of gold. Even just speculating as he wasn't sort of all in, but he was certainly just giving it that possibility as something to entertain as a thought. And all those other names, we've seen the Paul Tudor Jones, Guggenheim, Fidelity, and Citi's Fitzpatrick, and these people, PayPal, Square, others, all very much involved. Visa most recently, right? So this is stuff. I don't want to toot our own horn, but Paul and I were saying this stuff, in the age of cryptocurrency. That there is this moment where you're going to see some of these institutions go, we need to be in on this, and I think that if you combine that with the macroeconomic backdrop, right, the COVID crisis, the looming debt crisis that I think is going to have to get figured out how we're going to pay this thing off. Money printing, which, by the way, I'm not necessarily opposed to. I don't think central banks have any choice but to print money right now. The model absolutely demands it. But at the same time, it's inherently challenging the very notion of what is our money, along with climate change, along with the fact that the Bitcoin itself became the inspiration for central banks like China's and the ECB to be really moving much more rapidly than we ever expected on a central bank digital currency. And that arguably raising questions about the hegemony of the dollar in the global US financial system.
Yes.
There's a lot happening at once right now that really does feel as if there's a reckoning underway, and that one way or another, this technology has to be a part of it in some form. So I definitely feel like I'm more convinced, the conviction is stronger than ever that we are at this critical moment of transformation.
I think I could not agree with you more. And I actually just want to go back for a minute to something you said when you were talking about how once you realized the importance of what it meant that there could be some sort of system that didn't have to rely on a centralized government that could be used to exchange value and create value and store value, that how could you not write about it? Well, that's great. And I'm so thankful that you felt that way, because not a lot of authors and reporters did feel that way at the time. I think that one thing that's really hampered the development of cryptocurrency is how it's been reported in the media. And so I really, when we can go, actually, why don't we just say that we're now firmly in the "what are you doing now" question of the discussion, because we can't help but go there. But you said at the time, how could you not write about it? Well, you were very unique, you and Paul, and just maybe a handful of others. I can't even, maybe two others back in 2014, 2015, when this was, and when the Hill was first starting to have hearings, and things were like Mt. Gox were happening, and people weren't taking the time to really understand that it was the technology, not just these companies. So really, thanks. but I think that I guess the point I'm trying to make is, you say, how could I not have written about this? But why do you think that so many others shied away from it?
Well, I think that we see the world through the strictures of the framework that we've grown up in, right? So again, I think I was very lucky to have lived all over the world. And so I think that my frame, though I don't quite see the world like other people, so I'm open, I think, to new ideas. And I don't mean that to be anything like a boast. I literally mean that
it's your experience.
That's the structures that we have, right? And so, and I know that there's so many other things I see in the world that I'm like a blinkered blind old man on, that I can't think outside them. The arguments I have with somebody in my household about BTS, for example, is that. I won't say who it is.
We don't have to get into that.
Don't go there. But the point is that I think that becomes difficult for folks to not see it. So the first thing you think about when you see crypto is crime, and you're like, okay, that's bad. Right. And no one's going, but they're looking at they're taking money and a dollar for what it is, for one, right? They're saying this dollar is this stable reference point that has no politics associated with it whatsoever. It's just a thing that exists and always will be, like it's a universal truth. The dollar is the dollar, right? Which of course it's not. It's a completely politically constructed concept, right? And it is only as good as the faith in which people have in it. However, we use that as our reference point. In fact, I have a criticism of plenty of people in crypto for this reason, because we're obsessed with the price of crypto in dollars. We're using this thing. We're already at that point. So you have to be able to suspend disbelief and think about, okay, if I can question that, then I can question this. And then when you do that, you start to look at what it is that underlies money, and therefore what underlies Bitcoin. And is it therefore worth something questioning? Forget all of the activity that's going on around it, because that's a function of the fiat world we live in. There are people constantly scamming and we know from every moment in which technology has gone through these huge innovative shifts, that there's always scammers and snake oil salesmen and everything happening around it. There's
always the first adopters, the early adopters of any new technology are always the criminals.
Right, but it's an opportunity. Like there's always dreamers and there's always people who get duped, and this is a feature of every big technological shift. Invention of the limited stock company led to the tulip bubbles and those sorts of things. The bubbles, the South Sea bubble, those sorts of things all came around the emergence of the development of capital markets and things like that. Right. So we've had all these times where this stuff happens, but it doesn't mean that the underlying idea isn't profound and transformative. And you have to be able to think outside of the strictures of that existing framework to be able to see that point. And I think some people can. And I think that's what's exciting about this moment, because, when I think Michael Saylor is a really interesting example. I mean, I think some people think he's gone off the deep end a little bit with how extreme he's now getting into Bitcoin from MicroStrategy. But, he had a tweet back in 2013 saying that it would be short-lived or something. It was
right.
Days were numbered. The statement that MicroStrategy put out when they decided to shift all of that money to Treasury, that explained why Bitcoin is this incredibly important notion of a store of value in these times, was really well framed. I was jealous of how well it was written. I should have pulled out the quote so I could say it again. But the idea of understanding the permanence of the system and the security of the system and how its entire network builds upon itself was a really profound level of grasping its depth. And so I found that to be very encouraging, especially now that all these other names are sort of coming in after it. People are getting it. So it means they're getting outside of that structure, that echo chamber, and are able to step outside and, I can look at this thing differently right now.
Yes.
And that's exciting, right?
That is super exciting. And I think that it's also exciting that there's a difference between getting in to chase it as a store of value or some investment that you feel like you missed out on, so you're chasing the tail of it, versus getting in because you understand the important function that the transformational function that this technology can play in our society and the reasons why. And I think now the more we see people getting in and the reasons they're getting in, I should go read that statement, which I don't think I've actually read, that talk about the importance of the technology. That I think that is a real turning point that's a real turning point, and it's an important thing to note. So I'm glad you did. So, okay, but let's talk about, so what are you doing now? What is your day job like at CoinDesk?
Yeah. So, look, I got into this because for the same reasons I said before, like biggest story in finance, biggest story in 7,000 years. Why wouldn't you want to tell this story?
Yes.
And I hadn't, but at the same time, I had a lot of fun at MIT, really enjoyed it, had a good time working on some cool projects, including one that I'm very pleased is now being run at a joint project between MIT and Yale, which is this open solar project, which is all about how do we use solar installations and IoT devices to essentially create a form of collateral that you could then remotely lend against. And so it's about unlocking finance through. So
can we go back? I just want to understand that. So you have solar and you have IoT, Internet of Things.
Yeah.
And are you having like machine payments, or how does that work? Like, how are you?
It's the biggest challenge we face in it is like, is once like everything, regulation, the SEC, can we, but setting aside the law, which of course is another construct.
Yes.
What we're trying to do is create a lending environment in which I could lend to a remote community and so it's a form of security, a form of collateral. How do I create a mechanism that could turn on or off a device remotely so that my rights as the investor are protected if people aren't paying me? And that's not so I could be draconian and force rules on people, but rather so we can unlock capital, drive down the cost of it, and push money out into remote settings and build solar systems on that basis. Because we felt like the ideal system would be that. And the idea is that, and we've got prototypes up and running in Puerto Rico dealing with this. which is really nice to be able to do in the wake of the hurricane, which knocked down all the power lines. And so we've been able to build something around a school in a place called Ibanito, which is, it's all about self-determination. You have this mechanism to build your own solar systems, but you also got access to capital from people afar who can.
So it's like you're allowing the intellectual property to be lent for a time to build the system.
Property, rather just it's like your house is your collateral when you have a mortgage, and if you default upon it, somebody comes and forecloses it and they get the home, right?
Right.
How do I create a de facto version of that so it's yours? Your solar panels, your solar system.
Oh, the actual panels. Okay.
You can't use it. If you stop making payments on it, there's some level of blockage, right? It's a collateral. It's a form of security. And the idea is that if the power gets diverted back to the grid rather than to you, so and the payments are turned on or off. That's the basic idea of it. It's like anything that MIT Media Lab does. It's an experiment. We're trying this stuff out. A lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. And we're excited about the prospect that goes. A guy called Martin Weinstein is now running it. It's a very cool project.
And it uses a blockchain?
Yeah, so they're using Stellar, I believe, unless it's changed. I think there was some other things, but Stellar was the system they were using. It's a blockchain, but there's also payments using. It's worth looking at. It's called the Open Solar Project. So it's on the DCI website, the Digital.
I'm writing it down.
yeah, please do. And the Yale Open Innovation Lab, or the Sci Center for Open Innovation, I think it's called, Martin Weinstein's project. That was a lot of fun. But I'm not a research scientist. I'm not so good at pulling together research teams and the rigor of academia. I like writing stories, and I did a lot of public speaking. Did a lot of speaking in the last 4 years. So I realized that I'm still a storyteller. I still basically just
When you speak publicly, who mostly is asking you to speak?
Well, I mean, it's funny how it's come in waves, right? From a couple of years back, I was doing a lot of this. Now it's all remote. I'm doing a lot more again now, it seems. But I mean, for a while, it was in this 2017 kind of boom. It was everybody. There would be financial sort of types, so investment groups and trade associations.
So that you would say that's like sort of people trying to understand how cryptocurrency.
Right. A lot of it was like just educational stuff, trade events, that sort of thing. That was when I was doing a lot of that public stuff. We did a lot of speaking at MIT through their own industrial liaison program, where there were all these different companies that support MIT, but a lot of it also was with a whole lot of other independent groups. But yeah, I mean, every industry in many respects was interested in this. I was talking to media groups, I was talking to real estate groups, I was talking to energy groups. There's a lot, and I mean, there were obviously still loads of blockchain and crypto conferences as well.
They're a little different these days, yeah.
Yeah, they have changed a lot. They absolutely have. They were wild back in the early days, but I meant
the online thing.
Oh, everything's changed.
Everything's changed. Online. I meant that.
Every changed. Look, CoinDesk, big asset is consensus, and it's going to be.
I just saw you made the decision that it's going to be remote again this year.
We're going to try to add, if we can, at some point, some hybrid real person events if the circumstances allow us, but. We have no choice. These are big events, and you have to plan them in advance. And so, we're going for a virtual event.
I know this is not to take a little departure, but like we miss our dinner.
I do too. I love those dinners. They're wonderful.
Yeah. Last year it was such a quick pivot because it was in May.
Right.
So now, and you've already decided that this year.
How do we make it different? It's challenging though, right? I mean, but it forces you to think differently about how you put on an event in a virtual setting. So we're not going to give too much away, but hopefully we have some fun experiences for people who do experience it virtually and or in some level in person. But look, getting back to the thing is like media was it. I always felt like ultimately I want to be in media. It's where I feel most comfortable. It's where my heart is. So eventually when CoinDesk said, look, you got to come in and do this, it was too hard to say no to. it's a unique opportunity. I mean, we have there's significant investment going in. We're building a team. We're about 80 people now at CoinDesk. I think it was something in the order of 40 when I started. So we almost.
When exactly did you start in this role at CoinDesk?
So this particular role, I came in. Hasn't even been a year full time. In January 1, I sort of took on a part-time position of that in late October of last year. So sort of taking on this role really, I suppose, for a year now. Before that, though, I was the chairman of their advisory board. So we had an advisory board, and it was just a small job that I did while I was at MIT and while I was doing the company that I launched at Streambit. But ultimately, it was just too big a deal. This is again, bigger story around, and there's investment being placed against it to build out, a multifaceted media organization. We're investing in TV, we're investing in podcast, we're building out, news and editorial in a way we haven't before. And the events team is doing all sorts of interesting different things. So all of this is about, really, I think, an opportunity that is a window that maybe will not be around forever. But while we are going through this moment of transformation, we want to be the media company that owns that story. And so it's not just about telling stories for the crypto, reader, the stakeholders, as we call it, been around for a while. It's how do we tell stories that the mainstream can embrace and get into. So, I'm enjoying being back at writing again. I now have a weekly column called Money Reimagined. I've now launched a podcast of my own with Sheila Warren of the World Economic Forum. A lot of fun. The two of us just had a fascinating chat.
I listened to a couple of them as part of my research. It sounds definitely a lot of fun, and it's a great forum for you to have a way to talk about the narratives.
Everyday person can get into. So that's part of what CoinDesk is doing, and I think that's what's exciting about it. Yeah,
that's great. I mean, for me in my world, as as educating policymakers and working with policymakers, there's this interplay, obviously, between the media and policy, because you cover policy, you cover what's happening in the world of policy, but people that are making policy look to get informed from the media. And because there have been so few people that have focused strictly on cryptocurrency and on the issues around cryptocurrency, it's great to have a source that is a trusted source that people can use, and not just talking to the community, but like when people are trying to learn about cryptocurrency, now there's a place to go. And my hope is that one day, and I'm guessing this is probably your hope too, that the divide between them, it's not like no longer like, well, it's like a crypto media thing versus like the mainstream media thing. It's just to become media, because it's sort of like the internet. When it started, everyone had like an internet division. And then now, obviously, you don't have that. Right.
You're an internet conference or something, right?
Right. You're not going to go to an internet. Exactly. So then eventually it should just, I think we'll be winning when it's no longer a side thing or a separate thing or a different thing. It'll just be the thing.
There are media organizations that I think saw it coming and did well out of it. I like to point to Wired as an example. I mean, Wired's not necessarily hugely successful, but it is nonetheless, I think it did ride this wave of recognizing that the internet was not just a story about the pipes and the boxes that would be plugged together. It wasn't about machines. It was about society. It was about how the economy would change and how society would change. And so, and they owned that story in a big way, and I think it became synonymous with that change. And so, I think and then ultimately, a publication that speaks to everything now. And certainly that's the way I would like to see things going as well, for sure.
That's exciting. Okay, well, the final question is, I've touched a little bit on this, but what do you see in the future? Like, what do you think's next?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think the financial system is going to be transformed by this, and that's from the money side of things. I think that I don't know whether Bitcoin becomes some sort of global currency standard. I do think it does probably become some sort of societal reserve asset. So that it will be interesting if we do build a decentralized financial system on top of that, and I think that some of the stuff that's happening around DeFi is very interesting, and some of the ideas around collateralizing Bitcoin and lending against and so forth means that potentially it sits as this base layer of value that now in a much more decentralized way, entities can come together and forge these other financial systems or financial mechanisms on top of. So that I think is going to be pretty interesting. I do think that a lot of the other blockchain applications will get traction. I don't know. Again, I don't like to. So the crystal ball exercise here to me is not one of like, this guy's going to win, that one's going to lose, this is going to happen, this is not. Right. But rather like, what is it about the particular structure that some of these concepts have that I think are going to be almost inevitably a part of our future? I don't see, for example, how we build a ubiquitous IoT-driven, data-based system of smart cities and Industry 4.0 and all these things that people are talking about without figuring out how in this ultimately inherently decentralized way, we're going to share data across each other and use that as the core value driver of the economic resource allocation decisions within those economies without some form of decentralized governance of what you do with that, right? And then the blockchain, whether it's our blockchain, whatever it is, has to follow something around this idea of decentralized consensus. So these systems, I think, are inevitable because of just the forces of change that are happening alongside them. And I think that COVID really raises this to a new level. We have to get a vaccine out to however many people in the world now, 8 billion people, right? With all those complex supply chains and those complex systems and how is it safe and everything else. Managing that, is going to have some new system of governance that is not dependent upon, governments, because those governments, as we know, aren't necessarily very competent at managing pandemics. And we as a society don't do very well under those structures. Identity is a critical problem in all this as well, right? The British, the UK is handing out these little cards saying that you've been vaccinated. Completely forgeable, right? I mean, how do we build systems that, so there's a lot of things that we're going to have to think about, identity and credentials that are going to be forced upon us by this crisis. I think that's a very interesting trend. I am very interested in the future of media, not just only because I think CoinDesk needs to be in front of that. We've got AI coming in media. We've got Web 3.0 structures coming in media where, we have to think more about being a platform and a very different relationship with users rather than sort of just owning all of their data. How do we interact with them? Yeah. That Web 3.0 concept, a lot of the Ethereum guys and now Polkadot and others are pushing forward with, I think is really important. And is there anything in the evolution of media, which obviously is something that you're thinking about on a daily basis? What about sort of how it works with the fee incentives and how people get paid and how outlets get paid? And one thing I'm curious about is whether there's a role for, micropayments. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about metered payments and micropayments and for instead of subscription-based fees. And is that something that is a real thing? The CEO of Streambed, the company I founded, the CEO is Jenna Pilgrim, and she's going to be very happy that you finally gave me the segue to talk about Streambed a little bit, because I should be able to do so. Look, our view on this is, Streambed's view is that for now at least, the currency, if you want to use those words, and I think I use it as a metaphor for description rather than necessarily describing it is, but the currency of digital media for a long time has actually been data, right? So basically, you don't, when you're paying Facebook for access to all of that content that gets delivered to you in this decentralized platform manner, we think, we're getting it for free. Isn't this great, right? That's the great bit. You're not paying with your data and your attention. So that is, and basically I think of Facebook as like a Wall Street broker. It basically takes in data and then, it sees both sides of the market in the same way that Wall Street bond traders used to, where they could use that data and they can control who gets access to see what and sit in the middle of it and monetize that difference, right? Mm-hmm. And so we need to think about how do we change the data structure of the digital media economy. Because right now it's all siloed in these walled gardens, in these centralized systems. The Facebooks, the Googles, the Twitters, and in that world, I know that Jerry Brito's had some interesting thoughts about property rights in this world. But in that world, we're all beholden. There's a dependency that we have on that, and I mean that as a creator, not just as a user. As a creator, I need Facebook to tell me where my audience is. But you know what? Facebook's going to tell me how to win my audience in a way that suits their algorithm and their needs, not me. So the data is really fragmented and also completely opaque and controlled by these gatekeepers. So how do we build a system in which we can start to take data that lives outside of that knits us all together? That's kind of what StreamBed's all about. It's like we can take exchanges and interactions with people. You start with the origin of the media. This is where I think most people think about the future of media being a micropayments thing. So because that means like, oh, here's the video that I made, and I'm going to put a digital wrapper around it, make it digitally scarce, and I'm going to charge each person who uses it. And that's great. I think one day we may well get there, but It's not an easy thing to break into, because the systems are not in place, and because we are all dependent upon the network effects that Facebook and Google and others already give us. It's hard to get people to migrate away from where everybody is. So our view is yes, start with that idea of the origin and the unique starting point, but rather than turn that into some sort of artifact that I can sell separately and think and charge for, use it as a provenance tool from which to trace back to for every interaction that happens, and create a data trail that then becomes valuable for everybody who uses that data to put prices and allocate resources in the system. So advertisers and marketing people and creators themselves, who need to know and be able to tell stories about their reach and their impact and their market size, and tie that story to the content rather than to the accounts within that walled garden structure. So we think that data is the currency.
So who owns that content then?
Well, the content is still owned by the creator. That's always been the case, right? That copyright tells us that. Nothing's changed.
Well, unless you work for a place.
Well, then you sign. That's also right. Whatever.
But you're talking about like a place where you have many creators creating the content.
Well, yes, but we already have that, right? We already have many people creating content. Yeah, but and then what you can do. So we're trying to create. That's a whole separate legal question, right? And that question is really important. And at each stage along the way, there's either an automatic implied contract that I am the creator, or there's some formal contract that you have, and so into copyright, and so it doesn't. And each chain, this is hundreds of years of copyright law will tell you, if you have taken one video and then changed it into something else, then you have rights, but you have derivative rights. The originator has separate rights. There's a whole other legal conversation. Yes. But what we're trying to say is, like, along the way, whether it's people who are reworking content or just sharing it or engaging with it in different ways, each of those points along the way is a data point in different formats and everything else, in different platforms. And you can create this model in which that trail tells this story of impact and reach and connection. We think it's how you can create a picture of the connectivity that people have. We're calling it relationship strength between people who are interacting with that content across multiple platforms. And so I'm not beholden on one. I've got a story to tell about all of my connections in that regard. So basically, data, I think, and how we figure out how to capture data and use it as I say, a currency, as a tool, as a metric that is independent of those siloed systems, is what's really interesting. And you need a blockchain structure. We're using the Open Index Protocol, OIP. It's built on Flow blockchain. And the Open Index Protocol gives you a kind of a cataloging system. So you have the metadata of these
and
things.
How do people get paid?
That's okay. So this is not so. People get paid how they get paid now, right? So if you're an influencer, you make videos. You're not
talking about changing the structure of how people are receiving.
Well, this is what we think. This is what we think is important, right? It's like, we're not trying to say how you could get charged. It doesn't. We're kind of agnostic about that. You could charge with micropayments, but I could just get paid in dollars. The point is, I've got now data that is much more reliable and much more meaningful because it's not structured by Facebook or by Google. It's independent of that.
It's free of all of that.
So the point is, like, the data becomes the means by which you tell the story, you price your marketing deals, all that sort of stuff against that. That's what's, I think, really, really important right now. And I think the reason why I think it's important is because it is the economy. The data is everything. And so we've got to figure out how, and this is not just for media, this is for everything. We've got to figure out how that data, that really valuable data, is managed in such a way that it is fair and reasonable to both those who create it and both those who kind of interact with it and everything else, right? This is a whole question of privacy and everything else. So those sorts of big questions, I think, are really vital. And the future of media that goes with that, I think, is really important. You know, I think media organizations are going to have to, really think about how they're going to, I think ultimately the Facebooks and Googles of this world will be broken up because we're seeing all the problems that come with that immense power. I don't know whether that's legislation. I would hope that it's actually market forces that do so. But in that future, it's going to be a very different world for media companies. How do we reach our audience? How do we engage with them? How do we reward them? So anyway, my crystal ball is pretty fuzzy, but I just know that.
Well, no, I mean, it's like, hey, in 2013, you were thinking about this crazy internet money, and now you're thinking about this. So
we'll see.
That's really interesting. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today on Tangents. It was lovely to have a chat with you, and I hope that you have a lovely holiday.
Same to you.